Okay, this video is to prepare you for reading check 9, starting on page 60, right after that first gap. Montag watched through the window as Beatty drove away in his gleaming, yellow flame-colored Beetle with the black, char-colored tires. Across the street and down the way, the other houses stood with their flat fronts. What was it Clarice had said one afternoon? No front porches. My uncle says there used to be front porches, and people sat there sometimes at night, talking when they wanted to talk, rocking, and not talking when they didn't want to talk. Sometimes they just sat there and thought about things, turned things over. My uncle says the architects got rid of the front porches because they didn't look well, but my uncle says that was merely rationalizing it. The real reason, hidden underneath, might be they didn't want people sitting like that, doing nothing, rocking, talking. That was the wrong kind of social life. People talked too much and they had time to think. So they ran off with the porches and the gardens too. Not many gardens anymore to sit around in. And look at the furniture. No rocking chairs anymore. They're too comfortable. Get people up and running around. My uncle says, and my uncle, and my uncle. Her voice faded. Montag turned and looked at his wife, who sat in the middle of the parlor talking to an announcer, who in turn was talking to her. Mrs. Montag, he was saying. This, that, and the other. Mrs. Montag. Something else, and still another. The converter attachment, which had cost them $100, automatically supplied her name whenever the announcer addressed his anonymous audience, leaving a blank where the proper syllables could be filled in. A special spot Wavex scrambler also caused his televised image in the area immediately about his lips to mouth the vowels and consonants beautifully. He was a friend, no doubt of it, a good friend. Mrs. Montag, now look right here. Her head turned, though she quite obviously was not listening. Montag said, It's only a step from not going to work today to not working tomorrow to not working at the firehouse ever again. You are going to work tonight, though, aren't you? Said Mildred. I haven't decided. Right now, I've got an awful feeling. I want to smash things and kill things. Go take the Beetle. No thanks. The keys to the Beetles are on the night table. I always like to drive fast when I feel that way. You get it up around 95 and you feel wonderful. Sometimes I drive all night and come back and you don't know. It's fun out in the country. You hit rabbits. Sometimes you hit dogs. Go take the Beetle. No, I don't want to this time. I want to hold on to this funny thing. God, it's gotten big on me. I don't know what it is. I'm so damned unhappy. I'm so mad, and I don't know why. I feel like I'm putting on weight. I feel fat. I feel like I've been saving up a lot of things, and I don't know what. I might even start reading books. They'd put you in jail, wouldn't they? She looked at him as though he were behind the glass wall. He began to put on his clothes, moving restlessly about the bedroom. Yes, and it might be a good idea before I hurt someone. Did you hear Beatty? Did you listen to him? He knows all the answers. He's right. Happiness is important. Fun is everything. And yet I kept sitting there saying to myself, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I am. Mildred's mouth beamed, and proud of it. Notice that it doesn't say, the narrator doesn't say Mildred beamed. And beamed here is figurative language, right? Like a sunshine beam, something bright. So smiling very brightly and happily. So instead of it saying that her mouth was doing this, or instead of it saying Mildred was doing this, it's saying that her mouth is doing this. So what is being implied there? What is the implication? What inference can we make about the sincerity of this gesture of her smiling brightly? "I'm going to do something," said Montag. "I don't even know what yet, but I'm going to do something big." "I'm tired of listening to this junk," said Mildred, turning from him to the announcer again. Montag touched the volume control on the wall, and the announcer was speechless. "Millie," he paused, "this is your house as well as mine. I feel it's only fair that I tell you something now. I should have told you before, but I wasn't even admitting it to myself. I have something I want you to see, something I've put away and hid during the past year now and again, once in a while. I didn't know why, but I did it and I never told you." He took hold of a straight back chair and moved it slowly and steadily into the hall near the front door and climbed up on it and stood for a moment like a statue on a pedestal, his wife standing under him waiting. Then he reached up and pulled back the grill of the air conditioning system and reached far back inside to the right and moved still another sliding sheet of metal and took out a book. Without looking at it, he dropped it to the floor. He put his hand back up and took out two books and moved his hand down and dropped the two books to the floor. He kept moving his hand and dropping books. Small ones, fairly large ones, yellow, red, green ones. When he was done, he looked down upon 20 books. Some 20 books lying at his wife's feet. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't really think, but now it looks as if we're in this together." Mildred backed away as if she were suddenly confronted by a pack of mice that had come up out of the floor. He could hear her breathing rapidly, and her face was paled out and her eyes were fastened wide. She said his name over twice, 3 times. Then, moaning, she ran forward, seized a book, and ran toward the kitchen incinerator. He caught her shrieking. He held her, and she tried to fight away from him, scratching. "No, Millie, no, wait! Stop it, will you? You don't know. Stop it!" He slapped her face. He grabbed her again and shook her. She said his name and began to cry. "Millie," he said, "listen, give me a second, will you? We can't do anything. We can't burn these. I want to look at them, at least look at them once. Then, if what the captain says is true, we'll burn them together. Believe me, we'll burn them together. You must help me." He looked down into her face and took hold of her chin and held her firmly. He was looking not only at her, but for himself and what he must do in her face. "Whether we like this or not, we're in it. I've never asked much from you in all these years, but I ask it now. I plead for it. We've got to start somewhere here figuring out why we're in such a mess. You and the medicine nights in the car, and me and my work. We're heading right for the cliff, Millie. God, I don't want to go over. This isn't going to be easy. We haven't anything to go on, but maybe we can piece it out and figure it and help each other. I need you so much right now. I can't tell you. If you love me at all, you'll put up with this 24, 48 hours. That's all I ask. Then it'll be over. I promise. I swear. And if there is something here, just one little thing out of a whole mess of things, maybe we can pass it on to someone else." She wasn't fighting anymore, so he let her go. She sagged away from him and slid down the wall and sat on the floor looking at the books. Her foot touched one, and she saw this and pulled her foot away. "That woman the other night, Millie, you weren't there. You didn't see her face, and Clarice, you never talked to her. I talked to her, and men like Beatty are afraid of her. I can't understand it. Why should they be so afraid of someone like her? But I kept putting her alongside the firemen in the house last night, and I suddenly realized I didn't like them at all, and I didn't like myself at all anymore. And I thought maybe it would be best if the firemen themselves were burnt. Guy! By the way, that's his first name. His name is Guy Montag. The front door voice called softly, Mrs. Montag, Mrs. Montag, someone here. Someone here, Mrs. Montag. Mrs. Montag, someone here. Softly, they turned to stare at the door, and the books toppled everywhere in heaps. Beatty, said Mildred. It can't be him. He's come back, she whispered. The front door voice called again softly. Someone's here. We won't answer. Montag lay back against the wall and then slowly sank to a crouching position and began to nudge the books bewilderedly with his thumb, his forefinger. He was shivering, and he wanted above all to shove the books up through the ventilator again, but he knew he could not face Beatty again. He crouched. And then he sat, and the voice of the front door spoke again, more insistently. Montag picked a single small volume from the floor. Where do we begin? He opened the book halfway and peered at it. We begin by beginning, I guess. He'll come in, said Mildred, and burn us in the books. The front door voice faded at last. There was a silence. Montag felt the presence of someone beyond the door, waiting, listening. Then the footsteps going away, down the walk and over the lawn. Let's see what this is, said Montag. He spoke the words haltingly and with a terrible self-consciousness. He read a dozen pages here or there and came at last to this. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. Mildred sat across the hall from him. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. The captain was right. Here now, said Montag, we'll start over again at the beginning.